Awesome. So I was looking into your background, David, and just incredibly impressive. I think that when you think about angel investing, and even as a VC, we're in the business of trying to find outliers. And what I found interesting is that you yourself are very much an outlier. You started off your career in the military and somehow made it to the peak of a tech role, being the former CISO of Oracle SaaS Cloud and then now CISO of Atlassian. So I want to unpack that a little bit. If you could kind of walk us through what drew you to the military, and then how did you make that transition and break into tech?
Well, long story short, my family said that's part of our service. So as long as it goes back, my great-great-grandfathers, every one of them, my family line served in the military voluntarily. And goes back to a great-great-grandfather was a colonel in the Union Army in Ohio from the Civil War. And so passed down, I have a sword and pistol from the Civil War down to the family. And so part of it is just like you need to serve, right? And give back, and that's part of our mission. And so I have to admit, I also admit, serving the military, it's rough. It's a miserable life. But it's amazing of how much value you get from it, right? And I'm a big fan in promoting like veterans in the workforce because you learn a lot of values and principles, attention to detail, loyalty, commitment, how to operate under fire. Like when you're cybersecurity, it's great because we're going to operate the playbook. There's fire going on, but we know how to do it and how we get things right. And so, but after that, you're so hungry to do something, and you're just like, as soon as I left the military, Microsoft let me in. Like, no, wasn't quite there. So I just worked my tail off until I could finally let me in.
Amazing. And from Microsoft, you went to Google and then ended up at Oracle. And so what is it that allowed you to move up so fast in the ranks that eventually you made it to be a CISO at some very high profile, some of the top tech companies in the world, versus anybody else? I mean, especially usually you don't see somebody who came from the military background and then worked their way all the way up the ranks in a tech company.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I've never asked for a promotion in my life, ever. And I think after the military, my first manager at Microsoft, he kind of really told me three things. He said, David, first and foremost, right, is don't worry about career ladders and checklists to get promotions. He said, it's as simple as this. You make things happen. You make things happen, you're always going to take care of, and the company's going to value it enormously. The second thing is, whatever you own, project, technology, feature, process, be the expert in the company. Who owns that? That's David Cross. Who's the expert in that? David Cross. The third one, and this is the hardest one for most people to really realize, is it's not just about you, it's about how you make other people successful. The most valuable people are those that make other people in your company successful. Now, within that is then it just make things happen, right? And things will come and people will ask you. Now, this is the hardest thing. I was at a Team 8 CISO summit a couple of weeks ago in Miami. People are like, how do you become a Fortune 500 CISO? And I say, you've got to have a network. And it takes years to build that network. So how did Google find me? Did I apply to Google? Nope. They reached out to me because they knew me. How did Oracle find me? Did I apply there? Nope. They reached out to me. Atlassian, how did they find me? They reached out to me because I knew them. They knew me. And I built a network. And so what are you guys doing right now? You're networking. And it isn't just one network, one dinner, one event. It takes a couple years. But if you build that network, then people know who you are, the opportunities will appear.
So what I'm hearing is if I reach out to you, you might be willing to jump the ship and come work with us.
There's a price for everything.
I love it. So now I'm curious to hear more about the investing side. I saw on your LinkedIn your first angel investment was back in 2011. So it sounds like you've been angel investing for a while. What initially drew you to it, and how did you get started?
Well, I gotta say the first big one, I did some small things, but the first big one was Twistlock, right? And it was acquired by Palo Alto. I was the second seed investor. And so who are the founders? The founders are two people who worked for me when I worked in Israel. And they said, David, we need some advice, we need some help. And guess what? When you have a network and you know people and you trust them, that's where you invest. And that's the start of it. And so subsequently, I'm now a venture partner with Rain Capital VC as well. Well, how did I do that? Well, Chen-Si Wang, who runs that, she was one of the employees at Twistlock. It's all about the connections. Why did I start? I think the reality is you move up that, not say move up, you expand is that, are you just going to save your money in the treasury bond or the S&P index, right? You have to diversify, right? You have to take some risks. Who's ever been to Vegas, right? No risk, no reward. And so sometimes startups are about that. But I know one of the questions you're going to ask is then, how do you know what to bet on? I'm going to say you got to bet on something that you know, that you love, and you care about. Otherwise, you're just throwing on the roulette wheel, and you have no control over it whatsoever.
I was listening to some of your old interviews, and I heard you say in one of them that business is part science and part art. So is investing quite similar, and could you unpack that a little bit as well?
Well, I think there's two things on that. It's a really good question. One is I could say some of the startups I've invested as an angel that I didn't really know, they were total busts, right? Because how can I advise them? How can I really help them? I don't know anything about that business. That means I'm just throwing my money at it. The second thing is you got to look at the fundamentals, right? Some things that you can look at, you got a brilliant idea, but say, is there a market for that? How many enterprises are going to buy that? Are any enterprises going to buy that? And so you can look at some of the science behind that and say, it just doesn't fly, right? So part of me, I learned my lesson. I only invest in cybersecurity, right? Because that's all I know. And Renee's back there kind of laughing. But the other element is, but you also, I'm a kind of some angel and advisor on a few things, but you can look at it and saying, I know this is not going to fly. I'll give you a crazy example. Someone like, we're going to do endpoint detection, right? And take over and beat CrowdStrike and Microsoft. Okay, does the math work, anybody? How many billions did it take CrowdStrike to start? I leave it at that.
So something that I found really interesting is that oftentimes you'll have investors that have this domain expertise, and then they will only invest within that domain expertise, but they'll often miss a lot of big winners because they're too jaded or because they just don't think it's possible. Has that happened, like, as you've been investing in cybersecurity? Like, have you had some misses because of your expertise? Like, maybe knowing too much has been actually, like, to your detriment?
Yeah, I have one or two. I'm trying to think of a good one to mention, like I totally missed out on. But there's actually a hedge that you can do on this, right? Is so that even though I'm with one VC and an angel, though, you can actually invest in sometimes of the other VCs, right? In some of their funds that they're more diversified. You don't have the expertise. You're not going to be a direct advisor or due diligence, but it's an investment. And like, hey, they're looking at these other areas I don't know about, but I trust them. It's no secret, like I invest in Menlo, right? Menlo's like, they got some good stuff there. They got the deal. Great, I can do that. So that's kind of a hedge, right? It's a lower payoff, but it's a way of you still taking advantage of some of those greater opportunities.
Absolutely. And I would love to hear more about kind of like the journey of like how you find out about these deals, and like maybe we can talk about a few examples. You mentioned Twistlock, and so a couple of, I saw there was one that you funded locally that ended up having an IPO, which is like a very rare subset of companies that actually make it that far. So could you talk a little bit about some of the investments that you made, and then like how you found out about the opportunity, why you decided to invest, and then how the outcome played out?
Well, I think a lot of them all started from connections that they were starting small, right? You know, they're almost like pre-seed, right? You know, the pre-seed, right, is where they're reaching out to people that they know, right, and people that may trust them, and that's part of it. So part of it, how do you do that, is you work with them, you're connected with them, you network with them. That's one. Now, the good and bad thing is, maybe I'm slightly ridiculous, but I maybe get 5 pings a day on LinkedIn. David, will you look at my idea? David, would you give us some advice and things like that?
Who wants to pitch David right now?
It's a blessing and a curse, right? But I think after a little while, you get some practice, and the sniff test comes pretty quick, right? You can look at the PowerPoint or the deck, and you're like, this doesn't fly, you know? Is there one or two that I may have missed in the hundreds? Maybe, but I'm not sure. But I think it's practice, like the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs. How do you get good at presenting? You practice, 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 and you know it. And I think as you get looking at more of them, you'll know what, that flies. So it's like everybody. How do you know you're in love? The spark comes, right? And sometimes when you get these pitches, you're going to go, there's something there. I fall in love with it.
So they call it angel investing because in the early stages, these founders really need a lot of help. And oftentimes, as an investor, you can come in and really help move the needle for the company. How actively are you involved with the companies that you invest in, and how have you been able to help them?
Oh, that's another really good one. So technically, there's a lot of people that would like me to be an advisor, right? Say that, hey, I'm going to go be an advisor or board or things like that. Whether it's Oracle or Atlassian, they're not going to, our board's not going to sign off on all those, So what do? Well, you make a good deal, right? And say, okay, I will be an angel, but I want a good deal. I want a preferred, as an angel. And then you become an implied advisor, right? It's not a formal contract, right? So then, okay, who wants to say you're going to be a baby angel, put 10,000 or 25,000 in, and like you're never going to talk to them. You don't care one bit what happens with them, right? Of course. So I ask yourselves, if you put $25,000 as your first angel, don't you want to help them if they need help and you have the expertise? Or they want someone to look at their pitch or get feedback or make a connection? So who would give $25,000 and say, I'm not answering you. I'm not going to help you. But take it to the next level, saying, not only am I investing, I want to be an implied advisor. And they will take you up on that. And then the growth comes from right there.
A mistake that we see super often back in Florida, and I know it happens in every pretty much emerging ecosystem, is you'll have people who don't normally invest in startups maybe invest in one because one of their friends is building a startup or somebody in their network, and then it doesn't play out. Oftentimes they don't go according to plan. And then they're like, I got burned. I'm never investing in a startup again. But from the beginning, they had the wrong strategy because they weren't diversifying enough. So how do you think about portfolio construction and do you have a certain number of investments that you want to make per year, or do you not think about that as much?
Now I don't think about it as much, but I think one of the points that I forgot is how do a lot of people can get in early, not just angels, but say join a fund, right? There's a lot of VCs that have good funds that they'll let angels come in. You join the fund and you start to get in, so you start learning the process, what goes on, how does this all work, these connections. And so you have much less risk, right? Because you're in the fund, it's not just one bet, right? But you still you get a little bit acclimated to it. And then eventually, right, sometimes with funds, I can say, an example like Madrona here in Seattle, right, is that you're in the fund or things like that. They can say, well, would you also like to join as an individual angel with us so that you can do it? So I've done this a couple of times as well where, hey, the fund's investing in, but they're going to reserve, we're seeing now, they'll reserve some of that seed round for a few angels. And so you can kind of double down. You're in through the fund, but then you can double down as an individual. And that's sometimes another first step that you're like, okay, I'm doing this all on my own and I have no clue. But no, a big fund that is doing it. Oh, there's some safety there, right? And you're getting an advantage. So that's one thing, a way to think about it.
There you have it. Invest in a fund. So we're going to have some time for questions in a second here, but I'll ask a few more here. So when an entrepreneur is pitching you, are there certain things that you have in the back of your mind that you're certain boxes that you want to check or certain things that you're looking for right off the bat?
That's I think the good and bad is sometimes is if they've had an exit or something before, then they've actually got a plus sign, right? If they've never done it before, it's going to be a negative sign, right? So, but it doesn't mean you throw them out just from that one signal. A part of it is it's the passion, right? Ultimately, you look at most success stories, small and large, it's the founder has got the passion and commitment and they're all in. And versus not, I'm just doing this, right? And when you think about just in our normal jobs, there's an employee that someone wants to join your company, your team, and they're kind of missing a few things, but they've got so much passion and energy, and they're doing everything they can do to get their foot in the door. You give them a shot at it, don't you? And sometimes that's one of the things I look for in the founders as well.
So you're really looking for that level of hunger, that level of drive, and then the passion for what they're doing. I think is super critical.
Absolutely. It's the passion. It's if they're not all in, they're probably not going to make it.
I love that. Cool. Who has questions? Ken?
So you invest primarily in cybersecurity. Is that the only niche that you've invested in, the only one that you're interested in, or do you ever take meetings with people outside of that?
Yeah, so the question is like, I only as cybersecurity, do I ever look at other things? Occasionally I do, right? But I can say that I've not had what you call your batting ratio or your hit ratio has been 0 for me on the non-cybersecurity, right? So that's kind of like a feeling a little bit. Because at the same time, I said, do I really understand, is this going to fly or not, right? I'm going to say something about social media, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to work for that or not. And I think that was kind of my lessons learned, right? Is I just don't have enough data. But every now and then, I'll certainly listen to it. But I think maybe the real test is, are there other people I know and trust? Oh, they're buying into it? Well, maybe I'll join them, right? And so I think that's the other signal. If there's another signal in that, then that's saying, oh man, John and Dave and things like that, they're all investing in it. I trust them. They've been good success. Okay, I'll join it. So.
I'm looking for a prosaic answer. How do you keep track of your portfolio? Like, do you use Excel? Do you have Dropbox folders? Like, do you use a service?
The question is like, how to keep track of your portfolio. Two things is certainly now I think a lot of the angels, they're all in like a Carta now, so that makes it a little easier. The other thing for me is like going back to 20 years ago, I started a real estate business I've had as well. And so I built everything in Excel. I put everything in Excel still. And, I'm not a billionaire, so I guess I can still use Excel.
In the back?
So I noticed that there's a lot of emphasis on the dev. So I was wondering if you could tell me about how to actually build real relationships that translate.
Yeah, the question, I talked about networking. How do you build relationships? So part of it is, I think there is the element of the networking and meeting people and things like that. But then I tell lots of people like, oh, I want to get into a company. I want to build an network. I said, where's your blog? Where's your GitHub repos, right? Those type of things. Like, if you don't have anything, how are you going to build a network? How are you going to build a connection? How do I know who you are? You say, give me a shot. Well, do something about it, right? I go way back to my Microsoft years. So my first job at Microsoft was not in the product group, where I was eventually went to security as my dream. I got into Microsoft consulting. I did whatever it take to get my foot in the door. And then I said, I want to join Windows Security. I want to be a PM, a program manager in Windows Security. They're like, David, they write white papers, they speak at conferences and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. So what did I do? On my own time, I wrote 8 Microsoft white papers on PKI. You can go still look up my name. I went and spoke at RSA and at Tech Ed, Microsoft Tech Ed, on my own dime, right? And they eventually said, okay, David, we'll give you a shot. But you got to drop a level. I went from level 64 to 63. At Microsoft. But did I ever look back? Of course not, right? But you find out what they're looking for. If a company's looking for something, a network is looking for something, find out what it is, and then go do it. And then your network will start to build from that.
You had to assign a percentage value to the person versus the idea or the business. How would you decide that?
Ooh, really good question. How do you percent it on the person versus the business? I say I'm biased and I say is I'm going to put my MBA hat on and I say the business has to make sense, in some ways that, hey, they're taking in $100 million and their ARR is, 36,000 this year, it just doesn't, I give you ridiculous. But I think for me, I've been in the enterprise for a long time, right? I am a CISO for quite a long time now. I have to say, does it have the sniff test from a business standpoint? Would I buy this, right? Would I pay this for this? And if the answer is no, that's really hard for me. But every now and then, there's someone that's so passionate, so brilliant. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm just, they brainwashed me. I'm buying into it. But
What about the fund managers that you've backed? Like, what gets you excited about a fund manager?
That's a really good question. I think some of the fund managers they're smarter than me, right? And I think there's some really good ones out there they're brilliant. They know the market, that there's their mission, and they can really provide insights. So like, wow, I don't have that. Then that means that's someone I want to follow. That's someone that I want to invest in because they're better than me. And so I think that's a big part of it. The other element is, sometimes the best fund managers or partners, they really are great hunters. They can find the truffles, right? And that's not something I've ever been good at. I'm a closer. I'm not a whiteboard person. You give me a blank whiteboard, David, what's the vision? I'm like, nope, that's not me. And so, but you find the vision, I know how to deliver on it.
One thing I noticed is you're an excellent communicator, but you're also technical. And oftentimes, like, those things don't completely align. Like, how did you become such a great communicator? You're, like, very concise and very clear with your answers. Oftentimes, people will get caught in the weeds and, like...
I'm actually very paranoid about that one because I think I'm a horrible speaker now. Because 10 years ago, I had a brain aneurysm. It ruptured in my speech center. And so I'm so paranoid I don't speak very well anymore because of that. But that's a whole other story. The one thing is I know it's very controversial. It's on like there's the CISO Society Slack, community, talking about like, how do you get into the big? How do you become a CISO? And I say, go get an MBA. And there's the people like, you don't need to have an education, blah, blah, blah. Of course not. Do you have to have a degree to be successful? No, you don't, right? Do you have to have an MBA to be a CISO or get into business? No, you don't. But guess what? There's many ways to do things. If you go get an MBA, you learn how to read, you learn how to analyze, you learn how to present, and you're going to talk and read and communicate a lot. And so it's like practice, practice, practice. Great, go to MBA. You're going to get a lot of practice. You can do it other ways, but take the easy way, I say.
I love it. Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? All right. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, David.
Thanks for the opportunity.